Yeah, so like we were talking about earlier, I guess just kind of address some of those things that were brought up in that meeting yesterday. We'll kind of just start with that that affidavit of bias.
I've looked at the affidavit of bias it's filed. One of the important things to note is I don't believe we're actually an adjudicative body, and so I'm not sure that that's actually appropriate. But that would be something the AG's office could definitely answer for you. As far as the allegations, we've addressed all of those allegations that they've raised in those previously. Those have been looked at, and honestly, nothing's ever come out of any of those. While we did have some representation with the True Loves, that discontinued once we saw that they were potentially even trying to be involved in the medical marijuana space. And knowing I was a commissioner, that just wasn't something that we felt was appropriate going forward, even though it was probably legal that we could have represented them all the way through. We just didn't feel that was appropriate, and so we stopped that relationship at that point.
So I guess currently, what's sort of your dealings with them, if any?
I don't have any dealings with them personally or through the law firm with the True Loves.
Was this something that the commission ever addressed, or did you tip them off like, hey guys, I've got some previous dealings with them, just heads up?
It wasn't ever something that was, I guess, formally addressed. I had heard that they may have interest in applying for a license well before we had even started the process of issuing licenses, and at that point, if that was going to happen, we just felt like it wasn't something that we would do going forward.
And I guess too, let's go back to that meeting where originally, I guess 3 licenses were going to get handed out, but then only 1 was actually handed out. Kind of just take me through the process. What happened in that meeting for that?
So on our June 16th meeting, there was a motion made by the chair to go ahead and issue the remaining 3 cultivation licenses and the 7 dispensary licenses. That motion ultimately received a second, but failed in the vote. I had subsequently made a motion to award 1 additional cultivation license, and that motion was actually approved. And so there will now be 6 cultivators in the state of Arkansas.
And I guess what's the thought process, for yourself and maybe too as a commission on not handing out those remaining licenses that are legally can be handed out, up to 8, is that right?
So the amendment allows for up to 8 licenses for cultivation to be awarded. It's simply based, as we've said in the rules, and kind of our basis comes from the rules, where that's based on a supply and demand need and what's actually needed by the entire system. And so when we look at that, it didn't seem as if the data, at the moment at least, supported the issuance of all 8 cultivation licenses at this particular point.
There was a concern raised about that supply and demand, that maybe just because you had a previous relationship with the True Loves, that only handing out 1 more kind of sours the market for that cultivation. Obviously, they brought up some statistics that Arkansas, in terms of a per ounce pricing, is the highest in the country in terms of medical marijuana right now. And then, one would think that, hey, if there's more out there, that would actually drive the price down, which would in turn help the patients.
One of the issues I think that has been conflated on this is everybody wants to go to a pricing issue. The pricing has never been an actual mechanism or one of the standards that we as the commission have looked at. It's always been based on supplying the need. And so when we start talking about pricing, there's obviously an easy way to control the pricing. The legislature can come in and set a fixed cap and say you can't charge more than $100 an ounce if they want to. And so if they want to do that, that's the right mechanism for actually setting a hard cap on pricing. The rest is really up to us to make sure that there's sufficient supply in the system for the demand that's out there currently. We've also got issues with actually overproducing, so we can't just issue an unlimited number of licenses to ultimately have a lot of product that's grown and then potentially even going bad, so that the patients of Arkansas don't get what they're needing for whatever ailment they're treating.
I guess, and ballpark these numbers for me as best you can, but what is the current situation in Arkansas in terms of that supply and demand? Is there any kind of numbers that you guys look at specifically when it comes to that? Because obviously you didn't feel the need to hand out those 2 other licenses or anything like that.
So when I was looking through some of the data, it seems that as we bring on the additional 2 cultivators, which are already in production and will be begin shipping product out really within the next few days, it's one of those things where we're trying to estimate the total amount that they're going to be able to produce, even though we don't have that number quite in hand, and then look at where we are as far as demand side, and try to understand how we can make sure that we don't end up at a place where we don't have product available for Arkansas patients. And so it's trying to forecast and look at how both of those numbers come in currently, and as we bring on what would now be a 6th cultivator, to make sure that we don't end up in a situation where we actually run out of the medicine people need, and that's just something that we don't want to have happen.
I know this group also brought up the fact that in the future, and they kind of, I don't think they put a year number on it, but in the short-term future, they saw that Arkansas might need even up to 10 cultivators to keep up with the future and the growing demand. What are those things that you look at in terms of looking a little more longer term or down the road? And obviously you can't get to 10 because the amendment only allows for 8.
Right. As far as, some of the proponents have said we need 10 cultivating facilities. The amendment doesn't allow that. It only allows up to 8. And I think that's one of the situations where we just have to continue to monitor what the supply and demand is. And if we've got a situation where it becomes evident that we need more supply side, then that's something that the commission, I would fully expect us to address in the future. And that's one of the issues that I think is always out there, to make sure that the system is functioning appropriately. That's the role of the commission, and we're going to do that. We've done that, and that's something that's never going to be able to really be changed. We're going to try to make sure that everybody's got what they need, and that there's ample supply within the system.
I know one of the big concerns that this group also had was the fact that you never actually recused yourself, knowing that there was a previous relationship. Is that something that you felt maybe you should have done, maybe hindsight 2020, or even as you said, like legally you still could have represented them throughout the whole process?
I don't feel that there's any need to have done that, and so it never was an issue that really I thought was appropriate. Right on.
I think that kind of about hits all of the high points. I think that's about it. You haven't had a chance to flip through that yet, if I'm missing anything, have you?
Flip through what?
Just all the testimony and stuff yesterday that was brought up?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
I was in court yesterday, and then it's just been kind of crazy. Everything's finally starting to get back in the court system, which is great. It's just, doesn't that thing was like, I don't know, a couple hours or something. I got sent a link, and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, right. So I got to find some time to watch all that.
Cool deal. Yeah, so if there's anything that you kind of want to readdress, or if I didn't bring it up, because I'm like I said, I think I'm hitting all the high points here, feel free to reach back out, and if you feel the need to address those, we can cover it.
I think that's just that's pretty much where we are. We've continued to try to monitor the supply and demand and make sure that there's adequate supply for Arkansas patients, and the increase in card count is something we want to watch. And as that actual demand is there, that's what's important. I think one of the things that's kind of been taken a little bit out of context is an absolute amount of cards represent an absolute amount of cultivation facilities. And that's just not the way it was set up. We were always wanting to look at actual facts, what actual demand is versus actual supply, not an arbitrary number of cards equate to a certain number of cultivation facilities.
And about how many cards have been issued in the state? Like, you can kind of ballpark that if you don't have the figure in front of you.
I think it's about 60 to 62,000 cards currently, and that would be something the Arkansas Department of Health would be able to give you the exact number on. Sure. It continually changes, but I know we're north of the 60,000 card count at the moment.
Okay, good deal. Let me. I think it's about just and again, ballpark me here, just because how many? Because there's now 6 cultivation licenses. And how many dispensary ones are out there, give or take? So right now there are 22 dispensaries that are actively open. There have been licenses awarded for 33 dispensaries, and so there are 7 licenses that still haven't been awarded at this point. But those other dispensaries are in the process of opening, and hopefully will be coming online as quick as possible. And two, once I know this July 11th date was brought up, because then sort of all the scoring disappears on that. Would you guys have to go through that whole procurement process of scoring and everything beyond that in order to assign those last 2 licenses?
So if there was a need for additional cultivation past the July 11th date, then it would simply be a matter of putting that out for applications to be resubmitted, and then the commission would review those and ultimately, based on the merit scores, issue additional licenses if we needed to.
So everything would start over in essence? Just for those 2?
What's been done under our rules is we've held the scores from some of the previous applicants, that if we needed them, they could be able to start their facilities. So if we need additional cultivation facilities, they would have to reapply, and that would start the application process once again for whatever we're going to look to actually award as far as licenses.
Right on.